All right, good to see everybody here. Now, what we're taking a look at is the scenario-based essay, which is question 25. And for this particular essay, you don't get an option. All right, so you're given a scenario, and you'll notice that I've done a few different colors here. I've got the purple, the green, the yellow and blue for this particular dot point, this blue, green, and so on. And again, this one's relevant for both these. So the colors I've got here are reflective of the questions. So for the first question, it says outline, and usually with a scenario, not always, because I think the 2012 and 2013 scenario questions in the HSC, I think it had a holistic question, but since then I've seen, looking up, that they're all these dot points, and there's often 3 of the dot points. Now, generally they'll go over 2 business functions in the HSC, and then they're not the 2 business functions that are used for the question 26 and 27. They use the other 2 business functions, usually. But also in HSC, they've not had a scenario. They've had a graph instead that you'd need to be able to comment on. So when you sit your HSC, be prepared for anything, but I do tend to try and teach you what is the trend, the pattern that we can see. All right, so the first question is outline one advantage and one disadvantage of outsourcing part of the manufacturing process overseas. So, why would they want to outsource, which is to send part of what the business could do, like manufacturing, overseas to another country to do it for them? What's the advantage of it? And also, what's the disadvantage? So it's very important to get any decent marks, band 5s or band 6s, or even band 4s, to be able to reference and explain through the scenario. If you're not in just regurgitating the textbook, you're not going to do very well in the HSC. So this particular dot point's relevant to this. Outsource part of the operations process overseas. That's why I've highlighted it in blue. It's also relevant for another one of the dot points. That's why I highlighted it in green. You don't need to obviously pull out your highlighters in the HSC for different colors, but it just helps to be able to link the things. The other thing that I think is super important for that question, cost of producing some products domestically has increased. So that's a quote that I'm going to want you to use in answering this. Why have they outsourced overseas? All right, because costs have been progressively increasing domestically, and by outsourcing overseas, you'll be able to hopefully meet that cost performance objective. That's one of the advantages that you're going to talk about in here. Yeah. Now, the other thing here is we've got products with defects. So that's another thing. This is probably for the disadvantages of outsourcing. You're going to quote that when you talk about a disadvantage of outsourcing. If the business was to do this, there's already an increasing number of products with defects. By outsourcing, well, you tend to reduce cost, but you tend to also reduce quality, usually. All right, not always, but usually. So poor answers just basically regurgitate one of these and one of these disadvantages. So one advantage and one disadvantage. That's band 2, band 3, but much better answers will not just use the name of the business. It will also, see the purple here, this doesn't relate to any specific question, all right, but better answers will make sure they're talking about specific examples from the scenario. So they're going to be talking about the fact that the business would be outsourcing computers and other electronic items, yeah, and even the software components too. But then you also need to link it to these specific things from the scenario. All right, it's a trick to be able to do, and you've got to practice it time and time again to be able to get a good understanding of it. So let's move on in terms of some of the details that I want here. Make this a little bit bigger. All right, so the first thing here, guys, directive term, directive verb, it's super important you know it. So it's an outline question. This means it's to sketch in general terms, but also understand that it's a HSC essay. So it's not an outline like you would see in a short answer that's probably 4 lines. It needs to really be about 2/3 of a page. Now, if you only end up writing 3 pages for your HSC, well, it's some big problems anyhow. But then obviously 2/3 is too much because the other 2 dot points are bigger than this one. But if I'm talking about, say, 6 pages, which really, to be pulling off a band 6, you need 6 full pages. So you're not going to be getting it if you're not writing that much. I've not seen a kid get a band 6 when they're writing 4.5, 5 pages. All right. But if you write 5 full pages, that's still not bad. You know, you can still pull off, you know, decent band B responses, decent band 5 responses. So if we think about a 6-page thing, then I want this question to be about 2/3 of a page, no more. You can write more if you want, but you're wasting your time. All right. And it's all about making sure that you're able to get it all done in time. Yeah. Let me just check one thing here. Good. Okay. If you've got any questions, we go, guys, please just ask in chat. Well, what else do we need to understand from this question? It says 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage. This is super important. Kids often think throwing the kitchen sink at things are going to help. It doesn't. I only want 1 advantage, but I want it to be outlined. And really, almost because it's an essay, it's more like a describe to a degree. All right, I do want 2/3 of a page, maybe slightly less, for this entire question. All right, so I want 1 of these in a little bit of detail. All right, I don't want all of these just copied in and go, but I did more, it's good. We're only going to mark 1. Once you do 2, I'm marking 1 advantage. I only want 1 disadvantage, the same deal. So you pick from this table 1 of these only, right? And you're going to outline it and link it to the scenario. All right, so for this scaffold that I've got here, I'm sort of talking about each question, but I'm also going to show you how I'd set out the essay below as well. Now, you need to reference the scenario in all your answers, and not just superficially. I don't want you just to say the name of the business, but you must say the name of the business, and lots of times, or this business, yeah? But this business is an electronics business. It's not an airline business. It's not a gelato business. So you need examples that would be based on an electronics store, yeah? All right, so if I scroll down, you can see the different colors I've got there for each of the 3 questions. But if I scroll down to here, this is a little essay plan that I've prepared. Now, obviously you need to start with your executive summary. I want it numbered 1.0 executive summary. All right, you must do an executive summary for a scenario. I'd also recommend always doing this, so you don't have to think, right, which one's the introduction, which one's the executive summary. All right, I've got kids who've got good band 6s, always just using this as the top heading. It just keeps it simple. But you need to write 2 short sentences as a review of the scenario, a rehash of that business. Right now, it needs to be 3 lines maximum, no more. Some kids are writing half of their scenario and then half as a standard introduction, and you're just wasting your time. All right, so literally 2 to 3 lines, 2 short sentences, real short, on what the business is about. Then you do your standard introduction, which is to tell the marker what's going to be discussed in the essay. So in total, 8 to 9 lines, all right? And it's in your writing booklets when you do it, no more, but definitely no less. Some kids are writing 20 lines. That's fine if you end up writing 14 pages, 13 pages, you know, something crazy like, you know, 10 pages. But if you're going to write 6 pages and you're doing a whole page as an executive summary, markers aren't really reading it much. You're basically throwing your marks away once you've done more than 10. Okay. Now, back to how we set out this first question. Outline 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage of outsourcing part of the manufacturing process overseas. So I like to have a reasonably detailed subheading. It tells me when I'm marking it that the kid knows exactly what they're going to be writing about. They know the question and they're going to address the question. Rather than just say outsourcing as a heading, right? I want a little bit of depth in it. 2.0, I wouldn't do a 2.1 and a 2.2 because it is an outline question, all right? But I wouldn't mark you down if you did 2.1 and this was the advantage and 2.2 if it was the disadvantage. But I just wouldn't do it. How do we set these things out? There's a kind of formula we use. People talk about PL and things. I I kind of do that, but I more just think about these processes when I go through them. Okay. And every way to answer a question is slightly different because it's a different scenario. It's a discuss question or an outline question or an evaluate question. So there's always some slight differences. All right, so paragraph 1, and there's a second paragraph within this subheading. Don't combine them. Is to be about one advantage. You need to always do your topic sentence. For this, it would be a definition of what outsourcing is. Right, you then need to, for the next, following on from that sentence, you need to outline, but again, it's not in terms of a short answer outline, it's some depth, not just a real basic answer. Outline an advantage of outsourcing. Now remember to choose from that table we showed you earlier, choose one of those advantages. But remember, you can't just choose a random one. Poorer kids will. You've got to choose an answer that is linked to the scenario. So about reducing costs. Like I was saying here, you need to link it back to the scenario. How do we link it back to the scenario? You need to quote the problem. I like kids to put in a quote that's relevant. The cost of producing some products domestically has increased. That's from the scenario. So quote that. That's the issue. That's the problem. So by outsourcing, the one advantage of outsourcing deals with this specific issue. i.e., you need to say that it would likely lower costs by contracting out and that other outsourced business can achieve economies of scale, which can be passed on to your business. So you're making that connection between the issue from the scenario and your advantage. See how it's not real simplistic? And I want you to be talking about the name of the business, and talk about the fact that the computers could be outsourced, the manufacturing of computers and other electronics. Don't not be specific. Be specific. Talk about what the business does. Show the mark. You're not just regurgitating an answer. All right. The second paragraph again is under that subheading, but leave a line. Never indent. Just leave a full line. Now it's going to be about one disadvantage. This second paragraph. You don't need to do a topic sentence in terms of a definition of outsourcing because we've already done that. But you do need to do an opening topic sentence. Something like, one disadvantage of outsourcing for All Stars Electronics, use the business name, is blah, blah, blah. All right. Again, you need to outline, but not a 4-line outline like you'd see in a short answer, a disadvantage of it. Now, remember that table on the first page? You choose one of those things, but it's got to be linked and relevant to the scenario. This is where we're not so good at doing, and this is the band 6 stuff. You've got to identify the issue. Again, remember I highlighted it that certain color. There's an increase in the number of product defects. So if you were to outsource, a further disadvantage is that, and there's another thing from the scenario, so 2 quotes. All right, so the connection there would be that if you are to outsource, you're likely to or have poorer issues with quality. All right, but outsourcing tends to reduce quality, and that's a disadvantage. Now, this is something that you forget to do. You forget to link it to the scenario. You forget to explain that connection, right? But you also forget to parrot back the question. This means to repeat back the question to your answer. So at the end of each of these headings, not the end of every paragraph, but the end of the heading, you need to say something like this. Show the marker that you get the question and you directly answer the question and not something else. Often kids talk about, therefore we see a competitive advantage. That's not what the question said. Do what the question said. So here's my parroting back, my repeating back the question. Final sentence. Therefore, it can be seen that an advantage and a disadvantage of outsourcing of the manufacturing process for All Stars Electronics, so I'll use the name, is that it will likely reduce cost, but may also reduce quality. I've parroted back that question. Yeah. All right. Now, let's get on to the next one. And I'll try and get through it quickly, but I do need to do it properly. All right. So the second question is the next page. Examine 2 strategies that could be implemented to improve the quality of operations. So again, you only need 2 strategies because it said 2. All right, it doesn't want you to do 4 and do them superficially. And it is an examine question, which is a lengthy question, but it's an easier question. Unfortunately, this is a tricky one because it said examine, which means look in detail at 2 strategies. Now, how can it improve the quality of operations? So it somewhat becomes a sort of pseudo evaluation question because you're explaining how each of these strategies of operations can lead to an improvement in the quality of operations. So it kind of now turns from this into a bit of an evaluation question, yeah? Because you need to make that linkage. So that's where you've got to be understanding what directive terms mean, but how it all relates when a question's posed. Yep, what's your question? I'll come back to that in a sec. When you've got your questions, just post it. All right, so looking here, guys, we're looking here at 2 strategies of operations. I would be picking here quality control and quality assurance, okay? Yeah, look, it could be from 2 different ones. So I wouldn't mind if you didn't just do quality control and quality assurance. Maybe you're right. Maybe a better answer might be quick, say quality assurance. And then you could be also talking about, off the top of my head, I think, say technology. I think that's a strategy to be able to improve quality as well. Yep. So I don't think you'd lose marks by doing one of each of these, but you could be right. Maybe it would be better to be able to do technology and quality management, quality assurance. Yeah. Right, from what I looked at the market criteria, they wanted these 2, but it could well be fine to do this and also say technology. Yeah. Right, so let's go with this at this stage. I'm cool with either or at the moment. Yeah, but you're right. Generally, diversity is better. Picking some different ones, but you've got to make sure that they link properly. Right now, the length that you need to write about 2 full pages on this dot point, based on a sort of 5-6 pager essay, which is what you need to be getting. I'd want 2 full pages on this. It's not the biggest question that's going to be asked, but it's close to it. The final one's a little bit more, yeah? Now, because it is a larger question, I'd want 2 separate subheadings, 3.1 and 3.2. All right, I wouldn't really worry about a 3.0 opening paragraph. You're welcome to, but for kids who can't write much, do a 3.0 opening paragraph, which is just saying, talking about what quality management means and identifying that there's quality control and quality assurance that you're going to discuss. Yeah. But kids who write a lot, you're not going to get extra marks for that opening 3.0 paragraph, except it makes your essay look longer. So for kids who can't write a lot, probably a good thing. But for most of it at this stage, all right, you're going to run out of time. So you're going to need to be writing about things that are going to score you your marks. Yeah. It's like spending a whole page doing an executive summary. Well, for kids who can't write much, at least gives them something to write. Yeah. But for all of us, hopefully, you're wanting to maximize your marks and you've got plenty to write about, and time is more the issue. So I just do 3.1, 3.2. Yeah. All right. Now, because it says this particular quote, implemented to improve quality of operations. This is from our scenario. This is from the question, implement to improve quality of operations. Yeah. As I said, it kind of turns it into, you got to talk about how can they use these quality strategies to make it effective. All right. How can they improve the quality of operations? So you're also explaining, not just examining, you're now explaining how quality assurance can be implemented to improve the quality of operations. Or how can quality control be implemented to improve the quality of operations? That's where it gets a little bit tricky. It's not just tell me about QA and QC, because you've got to be able to look at the question, it said to do this. Yeah, okay. Now, as always, you need to reference the scenario in all your answers, not just superficially. The starting point, say the business name. But you need to go further than that. You need to use specific examples, and I'm always talking about specific examples. Yeah. So you need to talk about the type of products that the businesses would be having defects with. So they're not making, televisions, well, they might be electronics, but they're not making tables. They're not making cars. They're not making furniture. They're making electronics, computers, and other types of electronic devices. Yeah. Even software programs. So put yourself in the mindset of that. That's what you're going to be using as your examples. Yeah. So below here are 2 quality management strategies, quality control and quality assurance. So you need to use these to explain both QA and QC. Right now, these aren't in the textbook because frankly, I didn't think the textbook was that great at it differentiating between the two. But remember, we've got here, quality control is about the product and checking to make sure that the product is working properly. And you've got the 3 different time periods, feed forward, concurrent, and after, checks after, which are feedback controls. And it's product focused. Now, these are the things that's done. It's inspections, visual, taste testing, etc. All right. And who's got responsibilities. And it's a more reactive thing than proactive. Quality assurance, again, it tends to be about process focused, looking at the procedures. It's about being certified, particularly by the international standards organizations. And for manufacturing, this is important and this is important. And this says what this one is and what that one is too. Probably this as well, because they're probably selling to customers as well. So maybe all 3. Here's some other things that are relevant. Don't think so, because you're not selling food. This one's not so important, but it would be for a food-based business. So I wouldn't be mentioning this. Yeah. All right. Now, in terms of what I would write about, let's get to that one. So we're up to 3.1. Quality control, improve quality of operations. So I didn't just write QC or quality control. The question asks, how can this improve the quality of operations? So I make these detailed. So when the markers are, scanning, which they do, all right, and it's objective marking, all right, then they can see that you fully get what they're meant to be talking about. That's why the parroting back of the question is important. The end of 3.2 is important as well. Yeah. So once again, what are we including? You need to do a topic sentence, a definition of what quality control is. You then need to examine in great depth, not just a basic answer, all the parts that make up quality control. Things like that it's product focused. I need to see these terms: feed forward, concurrent, and feedback controls, but not just superficially. Don't just talk about in general what they mean. Talk about the name of the business, the computers, the inputs would be checked, which would be the glass for the computers or the plastics, the metals, the keyboards, the silicon chips. They're all tried, tested prior to being assembled. That is the first set of the control, the feed forward. Then concurrently, in terms of the computers, as parts of them have been assembled together, they'll do ongoing tests throughout in terms of quality control to check to make sure that they're working properly. All right? And then when the final production process is finished, then out of each of the batch of computers that have been made, or other electronics, give some other examples of electronics, but they specifically mention computers, they'll do feedback checks and feedback controls. They will check 1 or 2 out of every 100 batch of computers that were made to be able to see that they're working properly. And if they're not, then they'll check the rest in that batch. Yeah. All right. Now, once again, not only do you need to have specific examples, it needs to be linked to the scenario. So where's the issue? Where's the problem? And I've highlighted it with a color, but this is the thing. Put a quote in. The business has seen an increasing number of products with defects. So it's obviously an issue that quality control can help address. You're going to explain how they can help address this and improve the quality of operations. Yeah. All right. So as I said here, you need to use the business name, use specific examples. All right. And I want to see things like, if you're talking about quality, then often this term improved warranty claims can be used. This means how many customers would claim on their warranties. If there is less problems because you've got good quality control, so less defects, customers are happy with their devices, yeah, and they don't make as many warranty claims. Cool. All right, so that pretty much addresses that first one. But I do need to have specific examples from the scenario and actual products like computers, etc., and how you'd use quality control with these computers. Yeah, you're using the scenario to explain your answers. All right, 3.2, quality assurance, improve quality of operations. Again, not just QA, that whole thing directly answers the question. Now remember, kids aren't as good with this one, but like one of the students said before, in hindsight, would I do quality control and quality assurance? Maybe not. You might be better off doing 3.2. Pretty sure technology is an option, and it could be established or leading edge technology. Yeah, because it gives better diversity in terms of your answers, and it shows the mark you know what you're doing. But don't go and do something that is going to be a strategy that's kind of useless, that doesn't really link. Yeah. All right. So in terms of this thing here, once again, same format, topic, sentence, definition of what quality assurance is. Here's my dog outside. You then need to examine great depth, okay? Not just a basic answer, all the parts that make up quality assurance, which goes to that second page, I think, all right? Which talks about that it's process focused, that you need to meet those international standards from the ISO, and that you want to be certified in at least these two. I can't remember from the scenario if it was also a retail shop as well. If so, then you'd have customer service. So you'd have 9003 as well. All right. Remember to use the quotes of the problems. All right. We've used this quote before. That's why it had the two colors. The business has seen an increased number of products with defects. So how can this address this? And not just superficially, not just using quality assurance, which has ISO standards, is very effective at being able to address products with defects and therefore improve quality of operations. Guys, that's band 4-star. How? But not just how through specific examples. All right, so you're talking about how their computers are made. What is quality assurance? What can quality assurance do to be able to make sure that those computers have been certified, been checked well, and they're working properly? How does getting these standards and certifications result in addressing this issue and therefore improving quality of operations? Yeah. So specific examples of how it would occur. Yeah. All right. And this is what this paragraph sort of talks about here. You need to make use of the business name and provide those specific examples. I want these things littered throughout. Explain what this means compared to this, and therefore how being certified with this will mean that the computers have less defects and less warranty claims. Explain it. Tell me how it works. This is different to this one. So you tell me what this means and how being certified by the ISO for 9002, how would that result in the computers having less defects? Yeah. And once again, we're using the name of the business and those examples from the scenario. Now, you need to show that marker that you get the exact question. And once again, I talk about kids saying, therefore the business will sustain a competitive advantage. That's not even the question. I always say that crap. It's not the question. All right, so you need to parrot back the direct question for this particular scenario and this particular question. So say something like, it can be clearly seen that both quality control and quality assurance, or technology, if you did that as an answer, are two strategies that could be implemented to improve the quality of operations. Yeah. All right, now we're almost there. So let's pop back up to our scenario. Now we'll get there eventually. All right, so the third one, we'll get there. I'm back down. It says evaluate two strategies that could be used to improve human resource management. So this one is an evaluation question. It's the most higher order out of all of them. all right, you need to have 2 to 3 full pages on this dot point. Yep. If you're doing kind of a 6-page response written, which you should be. Yeah. And once you keep practicing these, you'd be surprised. Kids who couldn't write anything, they practice, practice, and practice. I speak to them after HSC and I go, how many pages do you write? And they go, smashed out 8.5 pages. And then other one, I did 7.5 or 9 pages or something. And these were kids who couldn't even write a page or two before the trial. They just kept practicing. And once you know your stuff, you don't need to think. It just comes and you write quickly. All right. So practice will get you there. But our goal is the 6 full pages minimum. Yeah. All right. So to evaluate which is a more difficult abstract directive verb and get to know your verbs, you need to look at 2 HR management strategies. So one I've chosen, leadership style, and the other one I've chosen is rewards, and particularly the non-monetary rewards. You can mention this, but more non-monetary rewards. All right. Now, you need 2 separate subheadings, 4.1, 4.2. I'd be more inclined to do a 4.0 for this, which is an overview of what you're going to talk about for about 5 lines, than for the previous one because it's an evaluate question. But once again, I don't think it's necessary. I'm only really recommending that to kids who are able to write a lot and have got plenty of time left over, or recommending that to kids who don't run out of time but aren't very good at writing much, and they just need to fluff out their essay. So I would probably still go with 4.1 and 4.2. Don't worry about the opening paragraph. Yeah. Can it switch from, I've got a question, can it switch from one function to another in the same essay? I'm not quite sure what that means. Try and rephrase that. But in terms of answering these questions, only ever write in the order of the questions, only ever. You might get a generous marker who doesn't care, but answer the first question, the second, and the third. In terms of these questions, I think I get what you meant. Could they do HR, then operations, then HR? Yeah, I think I've seen that before, but it's not really a big issue. You just look at what they're saying. You know, if it talks about HR, you're right about HR. If it talks about marketing, you're right about marketing. Okay. So whatever you get thrown as a question on the day in the HSC, you don't worry about anything else, you just answer it. All right, let's get back to this because I want you to start writing the essay soon. All right, so we're up to here. Now, because it's an evaluation question, then you first need to explain how the strategy works. So you need an explanation in evaluation. All right, it's not just an evaluate, it's an explain question to start with. Then you need a criteria to say the strategy would be effective, which is good, or ineffectual, ineffective, bad for the business. The criteria must come from the HR effectiveness criteria. That's where we get our evaluation of HR. Yeah. Like for operations, we get it from the performance objectives. Yeah. So the last part of the syllabus. Now, like always, you need to reference the scenario in all your answers. You need to explain. So always provide specific examples when you're doing your explanations. Here's the example I've got there. There has been a fall in productivity and morale of current employees. That's one that I've got there. So what you need to be able to do is to quote that and to be able to explain how this business, name of the business, All-Star Electronics, is looking to be able to, use, say, leadership style to be able to deal with this. Yeah. Okay. Or how can this business use non-monetary rewards to be able to deal with this problem? Now, just very quickly, if there's been a fall in productivity, but in particular, the morale of the current employees, workers aren't enjoying going to work. Yeah. Right. So when I took over as head teacher social science, the morale of social science, what do you reckon happened? Boomed or fell? Yeah, pretty much like our class. I'm pretty sure it's gone straight down a dive. They want the old head teacher back. Yeah. So in terms of this business, they've seen this fall in morale, which tends to see productivity not be so effective. All right. So let's think quickly. How could leadership style improve morale? So you're going to talk about how If you use democratic leadership style, don't worry about the laissez-faire, do democratic, all right, only, and say how that gives the employees a chance to be part of the decision-making process, or the ultimate decisions with the boss. And as a result, they feel like they're empowered. But I don't want you guys to be able to just say that. You need specific examples. So what's an example of democratic leadership style? Could be things like suggestion boxes, so that employees can anonymously be able to say what they would like to see change and occur. So not just the first bit, but examples. All right. We could also say that they could participate in higher level meetings and discussions. That's another one where you're giving employees empowerments. And there's lots of different things. Look in BSIA textbook to see those specific examples. But I don't just want that overview of use democratic leadership style. It leads to, better workplace morale for employees. How? Tell me. Where are your examples? I want the specific examples, not just the gibberish. Yeah. And I also want to link back to the business. What type of business is it? They're going to be outsourcing. I think it says here, they're going to outsource part of the operations overseas. Quote that as well. Show the market that you get this. So that's the insight that you need. If you're working at the business and your job's going to be gone because it's being outsourced overseas, that's the problem. That's the dilemma that the market's checking to see, rather than just regurgitating the textbook. So democratic leadership style is good because it's now saying, all right, we've got to do this, guys, but we want you to be part of the decisions. You tell us, what can we do differently? Can we outsource part of it maybe? Give us ideas. Now, some of those ideas will be useless. Some of them will be really effective. All right. But at least the workers see you as a boss, care about the fact that, yes, we're going to be potentially outsourcing some jobs overseas, but you're part of this decision. We care type thing. All right. That's what I mean by specific examples. Now, here's stuff on rewards. I think I put this in the wrong spot, but anyhow, on leadership style here. And here's the two things on rewards. I want us to focus on non-monetary rewards. And then we need to evaluate it with the effectiveness criteria. So let's finish this off. In terms of the two subheadings, leadership style, improve human resource management. Yeah. So topic sentence, what is leadership style? What's democratic leadership style? Add that in there as well, because that's the one you're going to talk about. Now, then you need to explain how leadership style can be used as a HR strategy. Even though it's an evaluate, do the explanation first. You're building up to it. As I said, you need to link it back to the scenario by quoting specific issues. This one and that one. Then explain to me, how does a democratic leadership style address this and address this? So talk about this addressing this first quote. Then talk about how democratic leadership style will address this quote. So do them separately, one after each other. All right. I want you using the name of the business, and I want you to be able to use the type of products they're making and the situation they're in. Okay. Now, I've already mentioned all these sort of things. Yeah. So suggestion box is one. Holding meetings in which employees are part of is another, but there's lots of examples. Now, the bit that we didn't mention, it's an evaluation. So you need to evaluate. You must, or you'll not get a band 6, probably not a band 5, probably an A or B. They're the evaluation criteria, especially A, especially the band 6. You need to evaluate how a democratic leadership style would likely lead to an improvement in HR effectiveness. So remember the effectiveness criteria. We're talking about if it does the democratic leadership style, it will probably see less disputation. It will likely see increased worker satisfaction, but also don't just mention all 7 of them. Mention 2 only, but explain how a democratic leadership style will likely lead to a reduction in workplace disputation. Explain that and how it works to get that. Explain how democratic leadership style compared to the autocratic will lead to an increase in worker satisfaction, and they're directly from that HR effectiveness criteria. I want that explanation. That's going to go detailed and provide examples, not just say, oh, it leads to it. Yeah, detailed examples. Some of you are getting it. Some of you are not quite. Now, the last bit, 4.2, rewards. Improve HR management. And in particular, I want non-monetary rewards. So what are rewards? What's non-monetary rewards? Yeah. And now explain to me how non-monetary rewards can be used in an effective HR strategy. Again, link it back to the scenario, use these quotes, make those connections. Now, as I said before, you need to evaluate. Explain how using a non-monetary reward, and it could be something like, here's one, providing training for employees is a non-monetary reward. Yeah. If workers are going to lose their jobs because their work is now being outsourced overseas, so that's specific to the business, then by providing training, delaying the outsourcing for a year maybe, by providing 6 month or a year training, then we can retrain those workers to work in other parts and aspects of the business. Therefore, as a result, non-monetary rewards can reduce worker disputation. That's the effectiveness criteria, because they no longer, or many of the workers no longer lose their jobs. They're redirected, retrained into other areas. See how it's specific to this scenario. Hopefully you're getting it. It needs to be specific to the scenario. If I could just swap this with, say, another business like an airline business or a gelato business, it's not a good answer. Yeah. Now, you don't do this, guys, as always. Did you understand the question? Parrot back it at the end. So I would say something like this. Trust me, this is gold. Both a democratic leadership style and the use of non-monetary rewards can be highly effective at reducing levels of disputation and increasing worker satisfaction, and therefore improve human resource management. That's what the question said. All right, if you can't parrot back a question, there's a problem. You're repeating it. Now, to finish it off, a 5.0 conclusion. I want our numbers. You need to write about 7 to 8 lines only. No more, no less. If you're going to write 15 lines, then 8 of those lines, put into here. You need to sum up what you have discussed in this essay. That's what a conclusion is. All right, guys. Please make sure you follow these processes, these procedures. Now, I want you 50 minutes to get stuck into it and to write what you've got there for me, please.